Hello everyone, and welcome to this bobsguide webinar. I am Neil Ainger, the Editor-in-Chief of bobsguide. The subject for today's webinar is Client Reporting Solutions, and we'll be looking at the options in hosted and cloud-based solutions that are aimed at wealth and asset managers, particularly referencing the cloud. We are very happy to be running this webinar with our sponsors Equipos and a guest speaker from Microsoft. The wide-ranging discussion today will touch on the increased market and regulatory demands for better client reporting, and crucially on how wealth or asset management firms can meet these obligations more economically via the cloud. So to introduce our speakers, we'll be hearing from Bruce McKee, who's Financial Services Market Development Manager at Microsoft, Alan Hamilton, who's the CEO of Equipos, and Simon Turner, who's the CTO, who will be joining us later on for the Q&A. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over now to our first speaker today, Alan. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Neil. First, by way of introduction, I'd like to share with you our background and the foundation for expertise of Equipos in this field. We've been designing, building, and selling client reporting solutions for more than 13 years. We have over 60 clients globally, and we talk to wealth and asset managers every day about their business challenges, which by and large are focused around retaining clients and growing their business. Client service is an essential component of this. Equipos has won a number of client communications accolades and awards, but we're more proud of our client awards that have been received. And recently, Northern Trust in Chicago was awarded the Best Client Reporting Initiative for the deployment of Coric and our Client Communications Suite by the American Financial Technology Association. I'm going to kick off this webinar by sharing our view on the top trends we see in client reporting and client communications, and also the impact that the hosted solutions are making in this market. The first of the 5 top trends, number 5, is customized communications. Clients absolutely want to see information that is unique to them, and this is driving a number of factors, including the demand for client self-service and better client communication services from the client services team. Clients report that they need transparent, relevant, and clear and accurate information. Customized client communications helps retain clients. The obvious benefits of delivering personalized client communications are transparency and relevance. Both clients and regulators require asset managers to present clear and accurate information, and it must be made available in a timely manner. What we're seeing, which is borne out by research, is that many clients are prioritizing the delivery of timely, relevant data above the provision of in front of the provision of long, detailed commentary, which is often done well after the relevant period has been reported. They need it when they need it, and the data needs to be specific to the individual client requirements. These requirements have been even more important since the 2008 crisis. So there's nothing particularly new about this requirement or what's trending in this, but these capabilities are essential. I'm going to take a quick poll here. So we're going to run an audience poll. You will get a chance to select a question. You should see the pop-up panel. We'd be interested in knowing how long it's been since you updated your client reporting solution. If it's relevant for you, please select the relevant time period. And in particular, we're interested if it's been more than 5 years. Okay, we'll give you a couple of seconds to click on that, and we'll look at that later. Technology has been moved on in leaps and bounds from this point. What we find is that many wealth and asset managers who implemented client reporting solutions more than 5 years ago have systems that lack the flexibility and the best practice capabilities. These are required to deliver the level of client service that the client really needs. What is new and trending at the moment is the drive to put the client services team back in control. Responsibility for creating and modifying specific client communications is moving away from IT and into the client services team. New systems have enabled much more control and freed up much more time for the client services team. Now, although they've assumed lots of new responsibility, they ironically find themselves more time to engage directly with clients because the manual process associated with report design, build, and modification have been automated by anything up to 90%, and even greater in the case of certain communications such as fund fact sheets. So now this time, previously client services would even spend time toing and froing back and forth with IT to build and modify custom reports. They can now spend time interacting with clients who are getting a faster service because they are interacting and delivering the modifications to the clients with the clients in real time. It's a much more efficient model. The next of the top 5 trends we see is access to information. Not only do clients want personalized information, they want to have access to it however and whenever they want. A recent survey by Capgemini and Merrill Lynch revealed that 92% of bankers believe face-to-face meetings are the most important. Yet 82 of their clients prefer to receive client electronic information, or receive their data through electronic communications. This is an amazing statistic which highlights the mismatch between provider assumptions and the client requirements. While no one is suggesting that the email and portals will entirely replace face-to-face communications, particularly in times of economic turmoil, the need for immediacy and transparency is driving the trend towards greater access to information via electronic channels. We're going to do another quick audience poll, and it's relevant to how and what we deliver information to our clients with. I'd be curious, it'd be fun to find out right now how many communications devices you all use, either in the office or at home. We're going to ask you if you could just select 1, 2, 3, or even 4 or more. I personally have got 4. I've got 2 separate mobiles, one US, one UK. I've got a laptop and a tablet, and I'm receiving various kinds of information, all of us at any time. So if you could select the number which you currently no longer can live without. In a recent survey by Scorpio Partnership, they did a survey and found that of all the clients that they dealt with in the wealth world, 83% owned a laptop, which I thought was even pretty low. 67 owned a smartphone, and 41% owned a tablet. They also interacted on the web 48 hours a week, which I thought was pretty high, but it's about 50-50 work and social. And they also interacted and communicated digitally between 20 and 28 hours a week. So it was really, really high online interaction within the client population that we're all trying to address. So what is their actual preference? There is this increasing need for more frequent and innovative communications in wealth and asset management is presenting a challenge for providers who need to achieve consistency of data across all the delivery channels. You need to present the information in a way that's appropriate for each device and matches individual user requirements. But more importantly, you have to manage consistency across all the channels. You can't have a completely different report on an iPad and then contradict that with a PDF that comes out 2 weeks later that has quite different data. You must have data consistency. So they generally have to come from the same source. So what do we have? We have web access is standard. I think you know that. Social and multimedia communications is definitely on the increase. And also clients are looking for interactive and dynamic portal access as well. Our number 3 trend is process automation. The client reporting process relies heavily upon a workflow, whether it be manual or automated. This is an area where we've seen massive advances in recent years, especially in the last 5. The clients have gone live with us in our client Cork solution over the last few years are achieving huge cost savings through client reporting process automation, and that absolutely is what's trending right now. As well as realizing cost benefits, wealth and asset managers are automating processes in order to reduce human error and mitigate operational risk. That's described here by Gert Rees, Research Director of the Capital Markets Group at Tower Group. I spoke to Gert recently, and he said he's focusing a lot on the management of the client interaction life cycle, how we interact with clients through the period of the overall life cycle of them being a client. That's a bit of a topic for another day, but it is relevant. Let's look at process automation. In fact, this is a real client reporting process in the asset management world. My marketing team are always reprimanding me when I use this slide because there's no way you'll be able to see the detail. I like it because it clearly demonstrates the many complex steps that you must go through in producing an institutional asset management report. There's a high level of complexity in that whole process, be it manual or automated. What we do is we dramatically reduce the automation or reduce the manual steps in these automation by automating a lot of these steps through that. And it's a very different workflow. You don't simply replicate all the pre-existing manual processes in this chart. You can shortcut many of them. The key is to apply a best practice workflow to the automated system so it delivers greater speed efficiency throughout, much fewer steps. Here's a real-life example of an Equicost client where we've done an analysis of actual cost of reduction in the process automation, the time and work involved. We examined their pre-automation reporting system with predictable results. The vast majority of the existing processes were manual, and each reporting cycle, in this case it was quarterly, required the same degree of manual effort. We found that 9% of the process involved report initialization, getting reports set up and the system scheduled, 22% data cleansing, 60% report building, 7% for review and sign-off, and 2% for distribution and archive. This, in this instance, equated a total of 164 man-days per reporting cycle, which translated at that time at about $160,000 of actual cost. This could be substantially higher for larger projects or bigger, more complex workflow. This can add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars savings per annum, and especially every reporting cycle this is repeated. So what did we do? We actually went through and automated those 7 cycles. Here we see which of the client report setups were eliminated, which is the system setup and the report setup, so we take those out. And then also which one became a one-off for automation, either implementation per report, and which now manual processes did have to remain. There is some manual processes for data cleanse and for report sign-off. Okay, and this particular case, it was dramatic savings. In fact, the average report run reduced from 20 days down to 5 or 6 days. Massive reduction in both time and cost. The additional benefit is accuracy is built into each step of the automated process. So there's so many fewer manual processes along the way that compromise the integrity of the data. You also get a lot more real-time monitoring of the data and a lot more management information. This allows the management services team to basically manage by exception, and routine work is completed without human intervention. So the client services team is focusing entirely on exceptional situations or data anomalies. So with this setup, the reporting team were able to shorten the reporting window, deliver more reports more frequently and on an ad hoc basis, and also increase the report volumes without increasing the staff numbers. We're getting up to the top 2. The second and most important from an overall budgetary perspective is the cost-cutting initiatives and the trends in the industry now to cut overall operating costs for a variety of reasons. Margins are being compressed. There's many other reasons to drive your cost down in the industry today. We talk to wealth and asset managers every day. Without exception, they have a really strong remit to reduce costs. Many have to generate operational savings, but few of them reach their targets. Some can be targets can be as high as 20 or 30% cost reductions. Compounding this problem is the bugbear of regulation. Regulations is being driven through the industry, and the administration surrounding it is becoming increasingly complex and, in fact, very costly. So because regulation forces transparency and presents a reporting challenge for all wealth and asset managers. The cost of compliance can only be mitigated by finding new ways to manage the data and manage the reporting process. So the same processes we're putting in to streamline the efficiency and improve client communications is also reducing the complexity and the cost of regulation. So what are we finding is that through the recent example that we showed you, that there's a dramatic time and effort reduction, and so there is dramatic cost savings through the automated process. We're actually seeing that in this best practice system implementation, which take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to implement, we can drive massive cost savings and actually produce an ROI inside the budget year. This is critical because you can now spend to save, and you can very much justify a new client reporting project on the back of the fact that it will reduce its costs within the implementation window. So looking at cost again, we're now coming to the area where we realize we haven't talked much about the hosting aspect, but this is really where some really major cost drivers are coming in. When we're reviewing how to cut the cost of client communications, the hardware infrastructure costs have a significant impact. Now, I didn't realize until recently how much of an impact that is. In their recent client reporting technology analysis, Tower Group cited client demand for hosting and outsourced client reporting solutions as key trends moving forward. For wealth and asset managers seeking cost-effective best practice reporting, hosting can truly make a difference in a go, no-go decision on whether a project goes forward. More experience in the hosting process with recent clients, the deployment is extremely quick. In fact, it's days and weeks rather than months. There is a degree of configuration and setup required to establish the templates and define the process automation, but there's very little labor-intensive on-site installations or any hardware configurations that prolong the deployment process. So the hosting solution dramatically cuts infrastructure costs, and I'll let Bruce in the later piece with Microsoft talk a bit more about that. So we've helped a number of clients recently go hosted using the Microsoft Azure hosted platform and having considerable success. We're getting 80% reduction in the overall cost of hardware and related infrastructure. These are dramatic savings. There's no upfront capital outlay and no ongoing maintenance overhead, so it is a real win-win situation. And the hard dollar savings on large hosted solutions versus on-premise alternatives are enormous. So the last item, in fact, for client reporting, which typically is a cyclical peak-prone activity, in many situations the capacity can now be literally rented by the hour to accommodate peaks in the reporting cycle, eliminating the need for hardware to be sitting idle in between report runs. So there's real situations where you don't have to have the use of the hardware the entire month or the entire reporting period. One last point I'd just like to bring up as we're talking about on the hosted side is when you do the hosting, there's issues around client data privacy, and Simon Turner might be able to address that later if you have any questions for him on that, our CTO. We have an architecture where we can render reports in a central hub, and this is more particularly, less about the cloud environment, more particularly for multi-jurisdictional environments where the data simply cannot leave the jurisdiction and has to be safeguarded there. Historically, central shared processing of large global wealth and asset managers with multiple jurisdictions has been limited because the data privacy regulations prevent client data leaving that jurisdiction. In most cases, each individual jurisdiction has a relatively manual and inefficient process. What we've been able to do is drive multi-jurisdictional organizations to benefit from shared central resources with a client reporting architecture that's both secure and affordable. Client portfolio data is fully obfuscated as it exits the jurisdiction, and reports are rendered in a central location and then returned to the jurisdiction for approval, dispatch, and archival. As the electronic reports re-enter the jurisdiction, all the client identifying data is then reinstated as a second phase rendering process onto the report. That client data never leaves the jurisdiction. This is unique, and it results in a step change in the operational efficiency, allowing multi-jurisdictional deployment of shared resources. Now let's look at the top trend across the board, even above cost cutting. Not surprisingly, it's client centricity. Anything that orientates your business towards being more focused on client is a real trend in the market at the moment. Certainly, experience proves that focusing on client centricity has a long and lasting impact on client stickiness and business growth. James Edsberg, an eminent consultant from Gill & Padfield, said recently in one of our breakfast briefings in New York that businesses that follow a client-centric approach enjoy higher than industry average margins and stronger client loyalty and referrals. Client centricity really is at the heart of what wealth and asset management firms are trying to achieve today. And those who adopt a client-centric approach are more likely to gain and become sector leaders. How do you actually become client-centric? Well, when you look at your organization, the client services team and the client servicing systems are the only place in your business that's organized in a client-centric fashion. All others are either data-centric or process-centric. With new best practice reporting systems like Cork, we enable wealth and asset managers to organize their data from any source in any format and bring it all into a client-centric view. From that point, we can then publish it in whatever format the client chooses to see it in, and the system becomes the heart of a client-centric operation. This is a necessary architectural step to move away from older systems so that you do have all your data in a client-centric fashion. That enables you to move forward and gain lots of flexibility and efficiency. So what are we seeing is the trends that we just viewed. The first four trends are actually converging on the top trend of client centricity. Customized communications, access to information, the driving of process automation, and the cost cutting are all converging on that, and it's driving very cost-effective client-centric communications. When you streamline and implement best practices in this area, not only are costs reduced, but your ability to distribute consistent, relevant information is greatly improved, and client satisfaction in this environment can be exceptional. So according to our earlier poll, within the last 12 months, less than 20% of you all have put in new systems. In 1 to 2 years, there's been just under 20%. In the last 2 to 5 years, there's been 11. And there's a significant number of users who have systems that are over 5 years old. What this is telling is that the ones that, those that have actually reviewed and updated the system are going to have a much easier time moving to the new systems. Those that haven't in the last 5 years are going to have a much more difficult time and should be looking at an architecture refresh to see what they can do about that. So I'd like to wrap it up here and covering on the top 5 trends, and we'll hand over to Bruce McKee, who will take you through the Microsoft Azure solution. Bruce?
Great. Thank you very much, Alan. So my name is Bruce McKee. I'm the industry lead for financial services at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for 11 plus years now in financial services throughout. So I've set myself quite a challenge because I have probably about an hour of content here, which I'm going to try to shoehorn into about 20 minutes. So please bear with me. It's going to be very quick. I'm going to skim over some of the detail. If you are actually interested in learning more, feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to set up a webcast for anyone who's on this particular webcast separately, if that's of interest to you, and tackle the sort of question of Azure. So, just to sort of put this all into context, Microsoft have been producing sort of global services way back in sort of MSN, which effectively a website, kind of 94, 95. It was the days of the World Wide Wait and pre-broadband. And then we launched Hotmail. And Hotmail's 300 million plus users, so is our live messenger platform. So we have experience at delivering scale global capabilities. And the interesting thing about Hotmail and live messenger that we found from an internal data center perspective is not everyone uses it at the same time. So, the Japanese might not use it, but then it will have to come on stream when it goes through Europe and then the sun passes into the US. And so a server could be several things during the course of a day as it migrates from, say, Hotmail to our search engine to other, maybe to MSN, which was being more heavily used in that jurisdiction or that area. And that was really the forerunner of cloud computing in many senses, because it kind of taught us how to optimize and maximize the use and the benefit of that server infrastructure on a global distributed basis. You fast forward to the cloud computing era in 2010, we have 1 in 5 of our enterprise clients we announced are using our SaaS offering, Office 365, so that's email and that SharePoint hosted, and we have over 100,000 paying users of Azure. So that's not just the MSN kind of free time, that's actual sort of companies using a fairly significant amount of compute time on Azure. So that just puts in a little bit of historical context around what we've done. Just to sort of explain, perhaps in more detail, cloud is one of those things that it's become a catch-all for everything, and it's perhaps bandied around a lot. And I just wanted to spend some time to explain exactly what I mean by that. What most people actually have is they have their own data center, a perfectly legitimate thing. We have data centers for our own use as well, and that's a physical data center you see there. You now then move to a virtual data center, so people talk about private cloud. It's not actually cloud in my mind because you still have to spend a lot of money on it. So if you put 20 million into a private cloud infrastructure, you still have spent 20 million on a private cloud infrastructure. You can't, whereas if you buy an hour of our service offering, it costs 12 cents. So there's a bit of a price difference there. So you then move into, what I'd consider true cloud, and you have 3 main areas. So there's infrastructure as a service, there's platform as a service, and there's software as a service. I've kind of mentioned Office 365, that's our SaaS offering. Azure is our platform as a service offering, and our infrastructure as a service offering. So just to sort of explain this in more detail, and I'll sort of just expand that slide there so you can see. On-premise, you manage everything yourself, the same with the private cloud. Infrastructure as a service, only certain part of that is managed by the vendor, Microsoft in this case. You actually have to manage the deployment in the middleware, the data, the application. You actually have to understand how it's going to scale out and be used. That's why we are a big advocate of platform as a service, where actually Microsoft manage the majority of what is being used, and that's from the network level all the way up to the runtime. You, as the end user, have to think about the application, think about the data that goes into that platform, and that's all you have to be concerned about. We take care of everything else. Slightly different from software as a service, where actually it's like email; it just comes down and ends up in your Outlook inbox. So cloud computing, there's a range of different scenarios that we see in terms of usage within our data center. So some things lend themselves to cloud computing much more than others. And frankly, we have the conversation. Cloud computing is not actually for everyone. If you have an empty data center and things to put in it, you're probably not interested in cloud computing. But if you've got a full data center and you're looking at what you can offload into a cloud computing environment, here are some of the things and some of the sort of features of the applications you might want to think about. So unpredictable bursting might be you've suddenly been asked by the CFO to run a whole load of reports. Growing fast could be something to do with mobile, could be internet gaming, or it could be a mobile delivery capability. I was at the International Payments Summit earlier this week, and one of the comments made by one of the banks was by 2015 there's going to be 2.4 billion smartphones out there in the wild. And they said that equates to 100% of the net wealth of the world, which I thought was interesting. So you have to understand where these things are going. In terms of the sort of cost offload, I mean, clearly you need to think about getting to your peakiest peak plus at least 20%. And there are a lot of savings to be made, anywhere between about 20 and 80% in terms of the infrastructure, by looking at cloud and how that can reduce the infrastructure costs whilst maintaining that flexibility. And of course, you only pay for what you use. So if you only need 2 hours, you pay for 2 hours. The other point as well that is very interesting is you can pay for very specific use. You can get very granular charging now. That's certainly something that we're seeing and a change that we're seeing in terms of the ability of businesses to react to it. So we tend to see this kind of split. Some applications are very much on-off. Some, sort of 15% odd, are growing fast. There'll be quite a few with unpredictable bursting. The client reporting area probably goes into the predictable bursting area, maybe with some slight panics, I guess, for the unpredictable bursting. I mean, that's what life's like, isn't it? So, that's kind of what we see in a typical application portfolio. So coming a little bit more onto, what Azure actually is, and I'm going to think about this first of all from a software perspective and then give you a sense of some of the hardware and the investments. So, at the very front end, we're actually at the very, very front end, we're device agnostic, so we can deploy these solutions out, and it can be consumed by Android, iOS, range of tablets, obviously the Windows platform, Windows Phone, etc. So device, don't worry about that. We cover all flavors. Then from a development perspective, clearly we support the .NET framework, but also Java, PHP. Also things like Python and Ruby, which are very popular in certain areas. We have a content delivery network, which is absolutely key in terms of particularly thinking about mobile devices and sort of trying to get information down to far-flung parts of the world and deliver that in a suitable, timely fashion. We think about integration and caching. We can also do big compute, so I'll come on to that with a case study. So that's what used to be referred to as HPC, so that's stochastic modeling and Monte Carlo simulations. We have identity and security, so that's the Active Directory, analytics. We can think about data management, so that's everything from SQL Server in the cloud to just storage, and we have some offerings around just very simple storage, tier 3 storage, putting documents up in Azure at a very low price point. And then this is all on a platform that is elastic. We manage it. It's usage-based. You pay for what you use, and it's automated. So if we have problems and we have to fail over, we've designed it, in fact, assuming there will be problems, then it will fail over automatically within your geographic boundaries that you preset. So just to sort of think a little bit more about our strategy, we produce software products for deployment internally, so you have complete data portability. So you can take anything, you can build it internally, but also you can put it up onto our public cloud Azure. The key things here are the identity, the virtualization, the management, and development. So if you think about identity, with the Active Directory capability, something like 93% of global enterprises use Active Directory for sign-on and security. So we absolutely use that for internal, but we're using that as well for external, so Active Directory in federation mode. So you can securely sign on to your services and have a single sign-on capability from your PC, etc. So from a virtualization perspective, the aim is very simply, virtualization is a route to the cloud. So you can go through and build a private cloud infrastructure if you wish, and then you can move those virtual servers up to Azure, and you have that complete portability because it's effectively the same code that's running in two different places from a platform perspective. And so you have that ability to move your virtual servers up and down from the cloud as you wish. And then from a management perspective, our vision, which we're realizing, is for system-centered, to be able to have one common dashboard to manage your internal capabilities and your public services, or your public cloud services. So you have, effectively, you can start to think of Azure as an extension of your data center, and you'll be able to do things like domain join. So you can get a kind of completely integrated view of from a management perspective. Development's very simple as well. You write once, you can deploy either locally or up to the cloud. That's the aim of these things, is to make it portable. Data portability is something that's absolutely key from a risk and compliance perspective. And I think it's one of those things that will increasingly come to the fore over the course of the next few years as people start to understand that you could lose things in the cloud and you can't get it back if you don't have that data portability, something that we give you. So just in terms of sort of thinking about some of the design features of Azure, this is state-of-the-art. We have put $15 billion into this cloud infrastructure. That's everything from concrete and copper wiring to originally to water pipes and diesel backup. We've looked a lot at power efficiency, and that's one of the big cost drivers within data centers. And we have, security features, strength in depth. So, it's not just a security guard on the front gate, although we have that. We even have things like tank traps in case there's civil unrest on the outside of the buildings. We have biometric passes. We have scanning, so we understand, who or what is moving in, and walking around on the floor in certain areas. There are areas you can't get into. I, as a full Microsoft employee, am not allowed to go there. And in fact, very few people are allowed to actually go into our data centers for reasons of security, audit, and compliance. From a geo-distribution perspective, one of the interesting things is, as part of the pricing function, as it were, we automatically make 3 backups of the data within inside one data center. So the main one over here is Dublin, and then we geo-replicate that to Amsterdam. So if we fail over to Amsterdam. And we kind of build these things out from a power and delivery capability to enable us to do that. And there's some quite interesting stories around that. We do back these things up with an SLA, so 99.9% uptime. We financially back that, we are achieving these because of the way that we've designed these things to be able to give global resilience from a failover perspective, and coming up with software solutions around this. And then from a compliance and DR, this is a constantly moving thing, and we're asked about this all the time. It is vitally important. It's also incredibly complicated because we support Azure in 88 countries. We have to comply to the laws, and we have to comply with local regulations. So we have to do all of that. But we build operations frameworks, and we operate and manage these facilities remotely in effectively a lights-out environment. And we have all the frameworks and capabilities, and about 2,000 people actually doing the online service management of all of this infrastructure. And we've put this into a really good framework, so we understand how actions we're taking comply with SAS 70 and ISO 27001, etc. So Just to give you a sense of our data centers, most clients are probably on a Gen 1 type data center capability with a power usage efficiency ratio of 2. We have moved from that, and Generation 3, that's Chicago, so that's 2,500 servers sitting in one actually shipping container that we've literally plugged in with water and power and a network cable. And now we're going to a modular design as we've tried to take that cost down. So if you look at that PUE rating, we've gone from 2 down to sort of 1.05, 1.15, that kind of area. So we're now using outside cooling and other things such as that drives down the extra power usage that's needed. PUE of 2 means that for every watt of energy you are powering a server with, you're using another watt of energy to cool or just for general overhead purposes. So that's what that means. That's a significant reduction in the energy usage. So what goes into a data center? This is a sort of typical view of I think this is actually one of the older areas of Dublin that you see there. What actually happens is it's way more than just the server infrastructure. It's all of these things that you see here, and that's about 60% of your operational costs right there. So you're looking at everything from battery backups to diesel power, and that's the sort of thing we had in Chicago. We've now managed to engineer this out of Chicago because we have 2 direct power supplies coming in, because we feel that it's a very small possibility that we're going to lose both providers of power at once. It did, though, happen in 2011. We managed to fell over to Quincy, Washington, because of the software that we use, without any change in service and capability on that front, and no interruption. So, moving forward, the sort of modular data centers that we're going to sort of look like this. If we landed anywhere, this is going to go to a true lights-out environment. We will quite simply be plugging these together, pulling down the shutters, locking it up and not touching it for 3 years until the hardware cycle refresh comes back in again, at which point, if a number of those servers have blown, we just don't use that area. So there are actually going to be no one in there with an ability to touch your machine. From a security perspective, any security guy will tell you, anyone who can touch your machine is no longer your machine. So, for us, it's great that we have that separation coming, complete air gap between the operations and the networking capability. In terms of where our data centers are, we have 4 in the US, 2 in the European area, and 2 in Southeast Asia. And then we have a number of content delivery network points. We have one of the largest network nodes, I guess what's the word? So one of the largest networks in the world to deliver at a very fast response time data down where you need it. And so that's why the CDN network is highly important. In terms of compliance, these are just some of the big ones. We are PCI, data compliance, so that's the credit card data security standard, but SAS 70, ISO 27001. We are working actively with the FSA, again, around trying to help them and others understand what we do from a compliance perspective. This moves forward. Talk to me in 6 months' time, you'll get a slightly different answer as we have further improvements in this. In terms of sort of customer momentum, I mentioned earlier we have over 100,000 users, paying users on Azure, so those will be sort of enterprise, etc. There are some logos put up there. Some of these are fairly large companies. You're going from Xerox and Boeing and T-Mobile and EasyJet and others. So it gives you a sense that this is not just sort of bedroom coders building something up. These are big multinational organizations that are using our Azure platform in very, very visible ways. The 2 case studies I just wanted to come on very quickly that are going to point out a couple of different things. So Milliman have a solution that's used by Phoenix, which is a closed book aggregator in the life insurance space. They rationalized a number of actuarial modeling platforms over the course of time. They brought it down. They're now using sort of 10,000 cores. It's probably more like 10 days now to go. So it gives you a kind of sense of the sort of usage. There's a couple of videos and case studies there so you can see. The interesting thing to point out on the right-hand side is the 44,500. Milliman did some testing to see how many cores they could link together, and they got 44,500 cores all running, doing their real-life calculations together. The other thing to point out is on a per-hour basis, that was working out at $4,005. So if you think about 44,500 cores, that's one of the world's largest supercomputers, and you're renting it by the hour. From a risk management perspective, this is actually a live solution used by one of the energy trading companies that our pension funds probably all invest in. So kind of well known, they're doing Black-Scholes modeling on Azure to do end-of-day calculations around the data. So it's a huge amount of data. What used to take 6 hours in terms of modeling that portfolio, they can now do in 3 minutes. And of course, that's a kind of scalability thing. So if you actually wanted to do it in a minute, you just throw some more Azure compute time at it, and it would come down even more. So that enables you to do different things to look at the sort of, the market opportunity to get insight into that data. And that's a really, really powerful thing within the capital market space. So just in summary, some of the benefits of cloud computing that I've touched on, significantly reduced costs. I hope you've sort of caught that from what I've said. The ability to shift focus. So, one of the things that we've seen is the IT department being able to say, well, we give you granular pricing. So if you want that run, it's, we can do it. We can do it on Azure, but it's going to cost you a certain amount of money, and we can charge you for that. So, IT really being able to charge the business back in a granular focus. And certainly, have no worry about having to update servers and do all that sort of stuff. It just kind of happens. The mobility thing, the growth in the mobile phones I spoke about, that's both internal usage but also external usage, your end clients. Huge amounts of storage and compute power, 44,500 cores being used, and that's just for one, run. It gives you a sense of the spare capacity that we have. We do see that ability and that agility to hit the market quickly as being, something certainly a lot of the startup businesses and a number of the ISVs are really interested in. And that's where a lot of the innovation is happening across financial services. It's scaled on demand. So you don't have to intervene. You don't have to pick the service up at 2 in the morning. It does it automatically, and it is a global reach. And we do provide this with a SLA backup. So that was me. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today, Alan. And I'll hand back over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Bruce, on that. Before I hand over to Neil, I'd just like to mention the upcoming Equipos Community Conference, which will be happening in Toronto on June 4th and in London on June 11th with some of the partners that will be presenting. We'll have a lot more of what we've talked about today fleshed out, including more representation from Microsoft on that. So perhaps, Neil, we could go back and address some of the questions.
For sure, and thank you very much, Alan, and indeed thank you to all the speakers. So let's move into our Q&A session now, and I can see we have several questions already. So if you do have another question, just type it into the box on your console, and I'll put it to our panel. We've tried to get through them all today, but if we run out of time, we will try to get back to you offline. So to our first question, which I believe has come in from Jamie Dewar, and he actually asked quite a good question, I think, gents. How does it scale is his basic question. He's saying, for example, everyone will want to do quarter-end reporting at the same time. So how do your systems cope with the peaks and troughs of usage?
I'll answer that from a holistic point of view, and then I might put it over to Simon for a more technical version. But from what we can see, the number of cores available on the Azure platform are in the tens of thousands, and the number of cores required in our processing is in the 10s, 20s, and 30s. So from an order of magnitude perspective, it's really not a big impact on the overall capacity of the Azure platform. And in fact, even at those capacities of 10 up to 40 or 50, which would shrink some of the overnight runs to very short, sub-hour type runs, we're still not going to significantly impact the capacity of the network.
Interesting. Anyone else want to comment on the scale question there? Or we have quite a lot of other questions. I could move on.
And just from the Microsoft perspective, just to say that's not a problem. we have plenty capacity.
Sure. I guess all those data centres you were talking about there, they can more than handle the peaks and troughs.
Yeah, I mean, a data centre is $500 million, so it gives you a sense of the sort of size of scale and the size of these things. These are, 10 to 12 football pitches in size and floor area, and sometimes they're 2 floors. So it gives you a sense of the amount of server capacity that we have. We're not going to be the limiting factor here.
Sure. Okay, thank you, gents. So I've got another question here that's coming from a wealth management firm, which spans 8 jurisdictions, and they asked the panel to explain in more detail how best to deploy a centralised client reporting system. And the firm is based in the UK, and they need to render reports, but are unable to move certain client identifying data out of their protected jurisdiction. So perhaps, Simon, we can ask you, because we do have Simon Turner, the CTO at Equipos, joining us for the Q&A. Maybe you would like to take that question, Simon.
Sure, thanks, Neil. Yes, as Alan mentioned, we have our client data privacy module, which sits on top of one of the core layers of the Coric platform, which is our data modeling environment. Now, just to understand exactly how this works, it's necessary to understand a little bit more about our data modeling environment, which produces effectively a logical data layer that sits on top of the disparate data sources. Within that data modeling environment, we can mark certain parts of the data as being client private. Those pieces of data will never leave a particular jurisdiction when information is moved back to be centrally processed. The data is effectively been anonymized, and then when those reports come back in from being centrally processed, the data is effectively inserted back into those reports. Those reports then effectively become marked as jurisdictionally specific and will be stored in the local document warehouse, won't be allowed to leave those areas.
Excellent. Thank you, Simon. We've got another question, and perhaps we could bring Alan in for this one. The second question, the third one we've got here is actually asked whether cloud-based technology is only for large multinational firms, which is perhaps a common misperception, but whether small asset managers can take advantage of it too is the question, really. What do you think of that question, Alan?
Yeah, it suits both small and large. We as an organization ourselves use the cloud and burst into the cloud to do virtual processes for what we run. So from a proportional perspective, it's perfectly reasonable for small asset managers to do the same. We're using infrastructure as a service. It runs exactly as it would on-premise. So it's really, in fact, for small organizations, it's going to get them a much higher level of capability that they wouldn't normally get. So yes, in fact, if anything, for the small to medium organizations, it's an even better, more cost-effective solution.
If I can just come in here, I mean, that's where we're seeing the innovation happening. So a number of startups playing into that space can suddenly get global scale on a credit card, something they haven't been able to do before.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, Alan, we got another question from a member of the audience, and seems to be directing it towards you, just asking about does a hosted solution offer the same capabilities as an on-premise solution? So, can it be as good in the cloud, really, is what they're asking?
Oh, I might even pass that over to Simon, who I think could probably answer it just as well.
Sure. Okay, Simon, you, as our CTO and our technology specialist, what do you think?
No, absolutely. The breadth of features and the breadth of functionality within the Azure platform means that it's possible that a client won't see any difference within what they run in the hosted environments to what they could run on-premise. Certainly within the Coric environment, our system runs in exactly the same way hosted as it does with an on-premise solution.
Okay, thanks. So we've got another question here about security and SLAs, which often pops up when you're talking about the cloud and service level agreements. So how can I be sure my data won't move outside of the USA, asked one of our listeners, so that they can continue to meet their regulatory requirements and client SLAs?
Right. I guess that's pointed towards me as Microsoft. So
I think it is, Bruce.
Yeah, I'll have a go, because this is a question that we get asked a lot. So first of all, if you're deploying an application and you're building out a Visual Studio, you actually get asked where you want to deploy it to. and you choose your data center, and then we keep 3 copies in that data center and 1 in the backup data center. So you would choose, say, Dublin, and you would keep 3 copies there, and then 1 copy would automatically be stored within in Amsterdam. We keep it just in those 2 data centers. It doesn't then go anywhere else unless you tell us that you want it to go somewhere else. You actually have that control. Now the question becomes, I guess, twofold. And I guess this is the other part of the question. Do people have this suspicion, or that they don't necessarily think that, cloud computing, hey, you don't know where our data is, and that's a complete fallacy, because we know exactly where your data is. It's just you don't. So you would know it's in Dublin and Amsterdam. We know down to the server level. We have to know down to the server level. But those guys who know where it is in the Microsoft operations area, well away from the actual physical data center itself, running it remotely, they can't actually get to it and touch it. They manage everything through software tools remotely. So, we do know where it is. Now, there is the other part. Well, what about if support? So what if there is a reason for us to be looking at SQL data, data store, maybe in a 24/7 follow the sun type support model? What actually happens? Well, the processes we have in place, and I double-checked this today, deny us from doing this unless we have general manager sign-off, which is a pretty senior role. And the only way that they will sign that off is that explicitly we have been asked to do this by you, the client. So we will not, even from a support perspective, be able to see or access your data for troubleshooting, because you don't want us to do that. And so you need to be really, really clear about that. So I think that removes that capability, that concern. Is there a possibility that, and I mean, we're talking incredibly long-tail risks here, for the data to, if Ireland or our Dublin data centre ceased to exist, we would automatically fail over to Amsterdam. We then have to have another catastrophic fault within Amsterdam for that, for us to have an issue. Now that is one of those such a long tail risk that the chance of that happening is so infinitesimally small that your current scenarios where you have in terms of how you handle data and your data center setup mean that the risks for your business are probably much greater as you currently stand than looking at that potentially very long tail and abstract risk where 2 major data centers cease to exist with a whole load of global resilience and redundancy and all these other things. So hopefully that gives the question asker a little bit of comfort.
Yes.
But if they want to sort of contact me directly, I'm happy to take them through that in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Bruce. That was a really fulsome answer, and it's really interesting how security, SLAs, resiliency, they quite often do crop up when we're discussing the cloud. I'm not sure if Simon's still with us, if he'd like to comment on that as well, just because it is such a common concern people have about moving into the cloud.
I mean, Bruce covered pretty much everything, and we do rely and also do work very, very closely with Microsoft to make sure that any solution that we put onto the Azure platform is completely secure. We follow exactly the same principles. Any of the environments that we offer to our hosted solutions have exactly the same ethos behind them in terms of support that the Microsoft one does. No one has access to our environments. No one has access to anybody's data with any of our hosted environments.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm conscious we're actually running out of time now, I think. So I think we'll probably call it a day there, gentlemen. Is there any final points that anyone would like to add or stress when talking about the cloud? I think we've touched on some quite important ones at the end there with security, SLAs, the flexibility that it can offer you. But is there anything else that you would like to add? Perhaps, Alan, we've not heard from you for a while, or indeed Simon.
I would just say, and I've just noticed there's another query around potential unintended consequences of any transition. I'm just noticing on my pad there's another question that we might not put over to you, Neil.
Sure. Okay.
We've been deploying on 2 client sites recently to ramp up the data, and really it's a transparent environment compared to you can't tell the difference in the operational issues whether it's cloud or not. whether it's in the Microsoft environment on Azure or it would be in another system. One thing you don't have is the multiplicity of systems required, and we put our development, our test, and our production systems in the cloud, and they all run in parallel. So we actually have a much, much simpler environment to maintain. So that's one of the bigger differences, is that it's just easier to maintain and run when it's on Azure than it would be in any other scenario.
Sure. Excellent. Okay, well, unfortunately, we are running out of time now, so thank you very much to our panel. It just remains for me to thank our sponsors again, Equipos, for a fascinating discussion today and for everybody's contributions. I'd like to remind our listeners that the recording will also be available on bobsguide. So thank you for attending today, and we look forward to welcoming you to another bobsguide webinar in the near future. Thank you, and goodbye.